You open the news. Somewhere, a war just started. You close the news. You go to the grocery store. And somehow, eggs are more expensive. Most people just shrug. They blame the crisis. They blame the situation. But nobody really explains the connection. How does a conflict thousands of miles away end up in your shopping cart? And more importantly, why does it happen every single time? Because it's not a coincidence. There's a mechanism, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people stop at the first explanation: oil. Wars, especially in the Middle East, disrupt oil production. Less oil means higher energy prices. Higher energy prices mean it costs more to transport food, run farms, and manufacture basically everything. That part is true, but here's the thing. Oil is only part of the story, and it's the easy part. If we stop there, we miss something much bigger. Something that actually explains why prices rise even when the war is in a country that produces almost nothing you consume. Why did grocery prices spike across Europe and Asia when the Ukraine conflict began, in a country most people couldn't find on a map before 2022? It wasn't just wheat and sunflower oil, though those mattered. Something deeper was happening. Most people think of the supply chain like a conveyor belt. You grow wheat, you mill it, you bake bread, you sell it. Simple, right? Wrong. In reality, producing a loaf of bread involves an almost invisible army of steps before the wheat even exists. Someone had to manufacture the tractor. Someone else mined the steel for the tractor. Someone refined the fuel to run it. Someone built the factory that made the fertilizer. Someone transported the fertilizer. Someone trained the farmers. Someone built the roads. Economists call this the structure of production. Think of it like an iceberg. What you see at the grocery store is just the tip. Below the surface, there are layers of work, capital, and time that made it possible. Here's why that matters. War doesn't just disrupt the final step. It disrupts every layer simultaneously. Fuel costs spike. Fertilizer becomes expensive. Crop yields fall. Steel prices rise. Farm equipment becomes harder to maintain. Fewer machines on the field. Shipping insurance goes up. Goods travel less efficiently. Logistics costs explode. Each disruption amplifies the one above it. By the time it reaches your bread, the damage has multiplied through every single layer. This is why the price increase always feels disproportionate to the actual conflict. Because it is disproportionate. The structure of production acts like an amplifier. Now here's the part that almost nobody explains in the news. Wars are expensive. Historically, no government has ever fully paid for a war while it was happening through taxes alone. It's politically toxic. People revolt when you raise taxes. So governments do something much quieter. They print money. This new money doesn't appear everywhere at once. It enters the economy at a specific point, usually through military contracts and government spending. The companies that supply the army get the money first, then their employees, then the businesses those employees shop at, and so on outward in waves. By the time that new money reaches ordinary people, farmers, teachers, shop workers, prices have already risen because all that money was chasing the same amount of goods. You got the inflation, but not the money. This mechanism has a name. Economists call it the Cantillon Effect, after an 18th century Irish-French banker who first described it. The people closest to the money printer win. The people furthest from it, that's most of us, quietly lose. And during a war, the government is running that printer at full speed. This isn't a theory. History shows it with brutal consistency. World War I. Britain, France, Germany all printed money to fund the war. By 1918, prices across Europe had doubled or tripled. Germany's situation got so bad that by the early 2020s, people were carrying wheelbarrows of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. World War II. The US government imposed price controls to hide the inflation. Officially, prices didn't rise, but the grocery store shelves emptied. People stood in line for hours for basic goods. The price control didn't kill inflation, it just changed its face, from higher prices to empty shelves. Same result for the person buying groceries. The 1973 oil embargo, tied to the Yom Kippur War. Oil prices quadrupled in months. American grocery prices rose 20% in a single year. Families changed their diets: cheaper cuts of meat, less fresh produce, more processed food. Ukraine 2022. Ukraine and Russia together produce roughly 30% of the world's wheat and 80% of its sunflower oil. The conflict triggered panic buying, export bans, and shipping disruptions. Flour prices doubled in several countries within weeks. Cooking oil disappeared from supermarket shelves in Spain, Germany, and the UK. Different wars, different centuries, different weapons. Same grocery bill shock every time. You've probably heard someone say that war is actually good for the economy. It creates jobs. It stimulates production. It's why America came out of the Great Depression, right? This idea has a name, and it's one of the most persistent economic myths ever. Imagine someone throws a rock through a shop window. You could argue, good, now the shopkeeper has to hire a glazier. The glazier earns money. He spends it. The economy grows. But wait, the shopkeeper has the same window he had before, and he's poorer by the cost of replacing it. The money he spent on the window was money he couldn't spend on a new coat, a book, a dinner out. The glazier got paid, but another tradesman lost a customer. Nothing was created, something was destroyed and then replaced. That's not growth. War is the broken window, but at the scale of entire economies. The factories that made consumer goods now make missiles. The engineers who designed hospitals now design bunkers. The ships that transported food now transport equipment. All that productive capacity is redirected, and then often destroyed. After the war, you have to rebuild what you had before even getting back to where you started. You don't come out ahead, you come out behind, with a grocery bill that never quite goes back to where it was. So where does this leave you? You can't stop a war. You probably can't change your government's monetary policy, but you can stop being surprised, and you can make smarter personal decisions. 1. When a conflict starts anywhere in the world, especially near key commodity regions, expect price increases in 2 to 6 months, not immediately. The structure of production has a delay. Use that window. 2. Recognize inflation for what it is, a hidden transfer. Money is being quietly moved from your purchasing power to someone else's priorities. Keeping all your savings in cash during wartime is a losing position. It's a slow erosion. 3. Understand that government promises to control prices during wartime always end the same way: shortages, black markets, and poor quality. Price ceilings don't eliminate inflation, they just change its costume. The goal isn't to be cynical, the goal is to see clearly, because when you understand why things happen, they stop feeling random, and you can actually prepare instead of just react. War is never just over there. Through oil, through supply chains, through printed money, through destroyed capital, it always finds its way to your daily life, to your table, to your cart, to your receipt. And now you know why. The world doesn't become less complicated when you understand economics, but it becomes less mysterious. And that's the whole point. If this video made something click, share it with someone who always wonders why prices keep going up. And subscribe, because next week we're going to look at something that might surprise you even more.